Hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, Earthlings. How are all of you today? Slight change of scene today. I've been repainting my bow in this very expensive paint, and hopefully it will hold next year and the year after and for several years, so I don't have to keep doing it. This video is all about boats, what it's like to live on a boat, and also an ambition of mine that I've had for years. I want to design and build my own ROV, underwater exploratory vehicle. And I've been watching someone on another platform. I've been watching some videos of a very, very clever person who gave me some brilliant ideas, very, very interesting. All about it. They were basically talking about the accident that happened, the tragedy with the submarine, but it gave me ideas, and my idea is I'd like to be able to look underneath my own boat and examine it with a remote control type of device, but I want to design one myself. It's something I've been sort of looking into on and off over the years. I've just never had any time, and today I'm on a complete day off. Did all my work yesterday in the house, and it's just me and Graham on the boat today. And somebody left a emailed me and asked, because they're thinking of living on a boat, they're looking into the possibility, and there's so much to say I couldn't really answer it all in one email. Personally, I love living on a boat, I really do, and so does Graham. They are a lot of work. If anyone's thinking of living on a boat, my main thing would be that the hull is good. Everything else can be fixed, more or less. The hull is very, very important. You know, if the boat's letting water in, that is just a continual nightmare, and actually can turn into a real nightmare. We had a wooden harbour launch when we were in Brighton, and wooden hulls, they do generally leak, so we sheathed her in fiberglass before we put her in the water, and that worked very, very well. And if you're thinking of buying a boat, it's not just the hull, you've got to look at all the inlets and outlets. Boat engines, generally speaking, inboards are cooled by seawater. They have a system where the engine sucks in seawater, it circulates round the engine and goes out of an exhaust. So you really need to be able to look at the hull and see how the fittings are, where the water comes in, and also where the water goes out. Where the water comes in is more important, because generally that's right on the bottom of the boat. So that's important. Also, any holes in the boat, any purposeful holes, it's really, really important to check that those fittings are okay. It's not the end of the world if they're not, because they can be changed, but with wooden boats, what can happen is the actual wood on the hull around the area where the hole is, where the fittings are, that can actually get breached itself, and we knew a case of that. Somebody else bought a harbour launch very similar to ours, and we woke up in the boatyard one morning and we saw this boat next to us. It had been pulled out in a dire emergency in the night, and it had a chair leg with a duvet and a pillow wrapped round it sticking out of the side of its hull, because if you breach your hull, use anything, absolutely anything, literally pillows, duvets, carpet, anything to just slow the intake of water. And I mean, that boat was going down, and of course boat batteries tend to be on the bottom of the hull. I don't know why designs are always like that, because then they're gonna fail pretty quickly. But they were lucky. They got towed out in the middle of the night, about 3 o'clock in the morning, and they were a liveaboard. They woke up and they heard, and what it was the engine inlet had just, the whole area of wood around the inlet had become compromised and had just broken free. Some people like metal hulls. They can suffer from electrolysis, where they thin on the waterline. Again, it's not the end of the world. Graham and I are big fans of fiberglass. Even if you get osmosis, fiberglass is really good. Plastic boat, and that's what this one is. And this boat was built in the 60s or 70s, when they didn't know much about fiberglass, so they built it really, really thick, way too thick actually, but that means it's a very, very strong hull. So a lot of the work I'm doing on this boat, it's above, you know, I'm struggling to try and get the boat up to scratch. But I never worry about the hull. I mean, we have a bilge, and I take the floors up regularly, and they're bone dry, and they always have been, apart from when we had squatters on it and they left the fresh water running. And for some reason, the design of this boat, they had things called drain holes, and that it was to stop water on the surface decks from building up. I can't think why they did it. And then the outlets were very, very close to the water line. And when we had the squatters on and they overfilled the fresh water, it weighed her down to such an extent that then those drain hole outlets became inlets, and then the sea came in. My brother-in-law actually flew down and he sat in the engine room for about half an hour looking, and he suddenly saw a splash come up from somewhere, and he identified exactly where what the problem was. So when we took her out of the water, first thing Graham did was seal those useless drain holes off, and there's been no problem like that ever since. But there are lots and lots of things to think about living on a boat. I like it because even though a boat is smaller than a house, we have a 360-degree view out of the windows in the cabin. And you just have this sort of sense of freedom because you can see all of that. In fact, the house kind of drives me crazy over the winter, because when I sit in the garden, I'm in quite a small garden and I can't see, and I come down to the boat just to sit on the boat and have that feeling of freedom. So it's a totally different, it's a different way of living. And I have just ordered on Amazon some little components, some shafts and motors and propellers for a little boat, and Graham and I are going to try and design our own ROV. Obviously no people will be on it, it's going to be on its own. There are lots of challenges with ROVs. You want them to be able to see, so that involves a camera. It gets darker the deeper you go, that involves a light. The propulsion system, all of these things require battery power. Batteries tend to be heavy. Then there's battery duration. There's all kinds of things, and then you can add things onto ROVs to give them other capabilities and other possibilities. And range, of course, as well, how far it can go without losing contact from whoever's controlling it. We've actually got a boat in here at the moment, like an explorer's boat, and it's got a couple of pretty serious ROVs on it at the moment. I'm sure you've seen them before. There's sort of big square cage thing with all the components on it. They weigh a ton and they're on an umbilical cord. I just feel if we start small and simple, I think that between me and Graham we can design something that's actually a lot more effective. And there are different jobs and purposes that people want from an ROV. So, and I shall continue listening to this person who's been talking about the submarine a lot and pointing things out on marine traffic and shipwrecks and stuff like that that can be explored that are in relatively shallow water in comparison to the Titanic, of course, which is just ludicrously deep. There is a lot to be explored down there, but this person that I was watching was saying, you know, it's not really that good for human beings to go down there. That's not where we belong, and I'm kind of along with that. Graham and I would never get in a submarine. Benji, as you know, has applied to join the Navy, and we've said, well, I mean, he agrees. He's not going for submariners. But it's a whole other story to have a vehicle that can go down and be your eyes and ears. And there are other problems that happen to them. I've seen some videos where whales come along and start bopping and nosing them, or sharks chewing away on the umbilical cord. So there's an awful lot going on down there. So I thought we'd start small and try and film the underneath of our boat and have a look at the crabs and stuff like that. So my little components arrive on Monday, and that's what we're on with at the moment, because we're really finally getting some days off together. It is Princess Diana's birthday today. Just to mention, I have checked the TIG, and the last time I looked, no, it's not live yet, but we'll see. Time will tell. And there's nothing I've really got to say about her today, because in herself she's, you know, not a particularly interesting person. And that's just about it. I just thought I'd say hello. I'm going to paint a little bit today, but it's nothing drastic, and put my big coil rope back and maybe go swimming later. As always, thank you very much for listening to my random waffling on about nothing. And I'd like to say a big thank you to the person on the internet who has pointed me back in the right direction of ROVs. Further than that, I shall say no more. Look forward to seeing you below.